Hello everyone, today your lesson is going to be about comparing fractions with different numerators and different denominators. So let's think, what are some different ways and different tools you could use to compare fractions? What's one way you could compare fractions? Let's look at some ideas. We can compare fractions on number lines. So let's say I have the fraction 1/2, and then I have the fraction 3/4. We could draw these on number lines to compare. So let's make a number line to show 1/2. So right here is 1/2, so I'm going to mark that point, 1/2. Now let's make another number line, but we'll divide it up into fourths. Now right here, I'm going to mark 3/4. So which is the greater fraction? 1/2 or 3/4? Which one is farther from 0? 3/4. So I'm going to say 1/2 is less than 3/4. Let's look at some more tools. We could also draw some pictures to compare. Pictures or models. So let's use the same fractions. 1/2 and 3/4. Now I'm going to draw 1/2. Here is 1/2 modeled and represented. Now let's draw 3/4. Shade it 1/4, 2/4, and 3/4. So now we've used number lines, we've used pictures. What's one more way that we could compare fractions? Another strategy. What about cross multiplying? We can cross multiply to compare the values of fractions. So to cross multiply, I take the opposite numerator and denominators of each other, like this, and we multiply them. 4 times 1 is 4. So 4 now represents this fraction 1/2. Now for the other side, 2 times 3. And some of you have said that this is a butterfly method because it looks like we're drawing butterfly wings. 2 times 3, that's 6. Now 6 represents the fraction 3/4. And I know 6 is greater than 4, so 3/4 is greater than 1/2. Now let's look at an anchor chart. Some different ways and things to keep in mind while we compare fractions. Number 1, if the numerator is the same, compare the denominator. So right here we see a numerator of 1 but we have different denominators. The numbers on the bottom are different. So this is 1/4. This is 1/8. So one super important piece of information I want you to remember is that the bigger the denominator, the smaller the piece. So if I said, would you rather have 1/4 of a pizza or 1/8 of a pizza, which would you rather have? And if you love pizza, you would rather have 1/4 because 1/4 is greater than 1/8. And you might be thinking, wait, but 8 is bigger than 4. This means this is divided into 8 pieces. This 1/4 is only divided into 4 pieces. So here's 1/4. Let me try it one more time. Make it a little bit more even. And then here's 1/8. So the 8th pieces are smaller. So you get less whenever it's divided into more pieces. Number 2, if the denominator is the same, compare the numerator. So we have the same denominator, 10 and 10. So it's divided into 10 pieces. Now we're going to look here at the numerator, the number on top. 3/10 and 8/10. So think, would you rather have 3/10 of a candy bar or 8/10 of a candy bar? And why? If you love candy, you would rather have 8/10. So 3/10 is less than 8/10. Because the numerator 8 is greater than 3. And that means you get more. Number 3, compare to a landmark fraction. So we have the fractions 4/10 and 1/2. So this is seeing kind of how your numerator relates to your denominator. So this is divided into 10 parts and we have 4/10. So, I know that half of 10 would be 5. So I know 5/10 is equal to 1/2. But looking back at our fraction here, this is 4. And 4/10 is 1 less than 5/10. So 4/10 is less than half. Number 4, compare the missing piece. So 7/8 is greater than 5/6. So this is just showing us this is missing one more eighth. It needs one more eighth to make a whole. And this one is missing one more sixth to make a whole. Whoops. So 7/8 is greater than 5/6. Let's look at our workbook pages. Before you start to cross multiply, because I know that's super easy and you're eager to do that because we all know that trick, but I want you to think a little bit deeper. I want you to think about the types of numerators and denominators you're seeing. I want you to think, how does your numerator relate to your denominator? Is it close to 1 whole? Is it close to 1/2? Or maybe it's closer to 0 and we don't have very much of it. So 5/6 and 2/3, number 1. So these are both almost 1 whole, 5, 6, and 2/3, or in another post on Google Classroom, you have your fraction strips that you could also use for this. I'm gonna go ahead, let's see, since these are both super close to 1 whole, let's cross multiply to double check. Six times 2 is 12. So 12 represents a fraction 2/3. 3 times 5 is 15. And we know that 15 is greater than 12, so 5, 6 is greater than 2/3. So use your greater than symbol. The next one, 1/5 and 2/8. So our denominators are getting a little bit bigger here, so those are going to be both broken into a little bit smaller pieces. So 1/5, that's not very much. And then 2/8. Even though 8 is a larger denominator, those are smaller pieces, we have more of them here. We have 2 pieces, while we only have 1/5 here. So I can conclude that 1/5, that's less than 2/8. Number 3, 9/10 and 6/8. Right here, look at your numerator, 9. And our denominator says 10. So our numerator, 9, is very close to 10. So this is almost 1 whole. We only need 1 more tenth to make that 1 whole. But 6/8, we would need 2 more eighths to make it 1 whole. So 6/8 is going to be a little bit smaller than 9/10. So 9/10 is greater than 6/8. Number 4, 3/4 and 1/4. What do you notice about these two fractions? They both have the same denominator. So when they have the same denominator, you compare the numerator. So you need to think, is 3 greater than or less than 1? Would you rather have 3/4 of a pizza or 1/4 of a pizza? 3/4 is greater than 1/4. Okay guys, I want you to complete all the way through number 10 on here. So stop at 10, do 5 through 10. Now let's look at 17 and 18 here at the bottom. Did more students buy lunch on Tuesday or on Wednesday? All right, so we're comparing, here's Tuesday, here's Wednesday. 2/5. I'm gonna rewrite those fractions, 2/5 and 3/4. So, before we cross multiply, I want you to think, how does your numerator relate to that denominator? Is this close to 1 whole, 1/2, or 0? So 2/5, this is just a little bit less than half. So this is going to be a little bit closer to 0, but 3/4, we only need 1 more fourth to make 1 whole. So I know 3/4 is closer to 1 whole, and 2/5, that's closer to 0. So our bigger fraction is going to be 3/4, which would be on Wednesday. Number 18. Did more students buy lunch on Thursday or on Friday? So here's Thursday, Here's Fridays. Let's rewrite those fractions. This says 5/8 for Thursday and 4/6 for Friday. So these look like fairly similar fractions. So let's think about it. 5/8. What is half of 8? Half of 8 would be 4. So 4/8 is equal to 1/2. So 5/8, that's a little bit bigger than 1/2. Now 4/6. What is half of our denominator 6? Half of 6 would be 3. So 3/6 is equal to 1/2. So these are both a little bit more than 1/2. But let's see, remember, the bigger the denominator, the smaller the piece. So the 1/8 pieces are going to be smaller pieces. And the 6 pieces will be a little bit bigger than the 1/8. So 5/8 or 4/6. I think 4/6 is bigger on Friday. Let's cross multiply to check. Eight times 4 is 32. So 32 represents a fraction 4/6. 6 times 5 is 30. So what's greater, 30 or 32? That would be 32. There, it was really close though. So we're going to say Friday. That fraction was 4/6. Okay, let's go to the back of the page now. Number 19. Explain how you know that 21/30 is greater than 2/3. Okay, I'm going to take our fraction 21/30. So 21, this is super close to the number 20. So I'm going to turn that into 20/30 for a minute. If we were to simplify this fraction, make it into an equivalent fraction but represent it with smaller numbers, what could we do? What could we divide 20 and 30 by? What factors do they have in common? I'm going to divide by 10. 20 divided by 10 and 30 divided by 10. So how many groups of 10 are there in 20? That would be 2. How many groups of 10 are there in 30? That would be 3. So 20/30 is equal to 2/3, but over here with our original fraction, our numerator says 21. Is 21 greater than 20? Yes. So if 21 is greater than 20, this is going to be greater than 2/3. All right. Let's go to number 24. Jackson played a video game for 1/6 of an hour. Haley played a video game for 1/3 of an hour. Who played the video game for a greater amount of time? So let's look at our fractions, 1/6 and 1/3. What do you notice about these fractions? I notice that they both have the same numerator. The numbers on top are both 1. So remember, the greater the denominator, the smaller the piece. So let's think, what's bigger? 1/6 or 1/3? 1/3 is going to be our greater fraction. So we can say 1/6 is less than 1/3. And our question wants to know who played the video game for a greater amount of time. And 1/3 belongs to Haley. Let's go to number 25. 4 friends had pizza at a party. Stacy ate 1/3 of a pizza. Alexa had half. T had 3/8. Natalie had 4/6. Which friend ate the least amount of pizza? That's a lot of fractions. Which friend ate the least amount of pizza? This time, we need to find the smallest amount of pizza. Stacy had 1/3. Alexa had 1/2. I'm not sure how to say her name, so I'm going to say T. She had 3/8. And Natalie had 4/6. So I'm going to start comparing these fractions. We're just going to take 2 at a time. I'm going to take Stacy. Stacy had 1/3. Alexa had 1/2. Now let's compare these fractions. And again, both of these have the same numerator of 1, but different denominators, 1/3 and 1/2. So remember, the greater the denominator, the smaller the piece. So 1/3, that's a greater numerator, so this is going to be smaller than 1/2. So 1/3, that's less than 1/2. Now we're looking for the friend that ate the least amount. So far, 1/3 is our smaller fraction. So I'm going to keep using this one to compare it to our next fraction. Let's compare 1/3 to T's fraction of 3/8. Let's cross multiply to compare. 3 times 3 is 9. 8 times 1 is 8. And we know 9 is greater than 8, so 1/3 is still less than 3/8. Another way we could look at that is, how does our numerator 3 relate to our denominator 8? What is half of 8? That would be 4, and is 3 close to 4? So this is close to about 1/2. And we just compared it to 1/2, and we know 1/2 is still greater than 1/3. So far, 1/3 is still the smaller fraction. Let's compare it to our last one. So her fraction was 1/3 of a pizza. Now we need to compare to Natalie's fraction. Natalie had 4/6. Now, let's see. 4/6. Look at your denominator 6. Is 4 close to 6? Yeah, it's pretty close to 6. What is half of 6? Half of 6 is 3. So 3/6 equals 1/2. And we know our numerator says 4, so 4/6 has to be greater than 1/2. So if it's greater than 1/2, and if we already said 1/2 is greater than 1/3, we know that 1/3 is less than 4/6. So this is going to be the least amount of pizza. We'll go with A. Stacy had the least amount. Let's do one more together, and then I'll tell you the ones that you'll do on your own. Number 26. Susie uses half to help compare 1/3 to 3/5, and to help in comparing 3/7 with 2/3. Explain how 1/2 helps determine which fraction is greater in each combination. All right, so we're seeing how these relate to our fraction 1/2. All right, our first pair of fractions, 1/3 to 3/5, and then 3/7 was 2/3. So 1/3 and 3/5. So let's see. We need to compare these to 1/2. I know 1/3 is going to be less than half. Less than half. And 3/5. How does 3 relate to our denominator 5? This is just a little bit more than half. Even though 5 is an odd number, we know that 2.5 plus 2.5 would get us to 5. And our numerator 3 is greater than 2.5. So I'm going to write greater, for this is greater than 1/2. Now let's look at the next group of fractions. 3/7 and 2/3. All right, 3/7. Look at your denominator 7. About what is half of 7? That's an odd number. Well, we know 7 is close to 8. What's half of 8? That would be about 4. And is our numerator 3 less than 4? Yes, so I know this is going to be less than half. Now let's look at our fraction 2/3. 2 is just 1 away from 3. So we only need one more third to make 1 whole. So 2/3, that's going to be closer to 1 whole. So we know this is going to be greater than. All right, guys, I want you to independently complete 20, 21, 22, and 23. Keep up the good work. If you have any questions,